Warning! Kinda Murdery contains adult themes, explicit language, and descriptions of violence. It is not suitable for anyone, and we recommend you stop listening now.
True crime with a dash of the paranormal, the garish, the strange, and the darkly comic. I'm Zevin Odelberg, host of Kinda Murdery, a podcast that's about more than just murder. It's my very own pocket dimension, home to a curated collection of bizarre and compelling stories, the unsolved, the unsettling, and the unbelievable. I cover it all, just so long as it's kinda murdery. Teenage lesbian sex murder Kiwis. The bizarre true story of Pauline Parker and Juliet Hulme starts now. In the early 1950s, nestled in the serene landscape of New Zealand, a friendship began to blossom under unusual circumstances. Two teenagers, Pauline Parker and Juliet Hulme, found solace in each other's company, their bond forged in the fires of shared adversity. Both girls struggled with ill health, a plight that isolated them from their peers and the carefree joys of teenage life. Their worlds, once lonely and fragmented, began to intertwine. Pauline and Juliet, in their isolation, became each other's lifeline. No other friends graced their inner circle. It was a duo against the world. This rapid and intense growth of their friendship was akin to a plot in a suspense novel, where every emotion is magnified, every bond a matter of life and death. And yes, my friends, that is foreshadowing. You see, as their friendship deepened, so too did the complexity of their shared world. They began to create a realm all their own, a fantastical escape from the harsh realities of their illness and the banality of everyday life. This creation was not just some simple childhood fantasy, it was a vivid, elaborate, and all-consuming alternate reality. The intensity of their connection raised eyebrows, in particular amongst their own parents. It was not just a friendship, it was an obsession. The girls were inseparable, their identities merging into one. They were no longer just Pauline and Juliet, they were a single entity, moving through a world that they had created. A world that understood them. A world where their illnesses were not a curse, but part of their unique story. Their parents watched as the friendship between their daughters deepened into something that they could no longer dismiss as mere adolescent closeness. It had taken on an intense, almost delusional quality that left them uneasy. In the eyes of their parents, the relationship between Pauline and Juliet crossed boundaries. The suspicion that it had become sexual was a source of significant worry, adding a layer of complexity to an already intricate situation. In the conservative societal landscape of the early 1950s, a lesbian relationship between two teenage girls was not only frowned upon, but also considered taboo, intensifying their parents' anxieties. Amidst these growing concerns, a pivotal moment arrived that would escalate the situation to a critical point. The parents' worst fears seemed to be on the brink of being realized when a significant change was announced. Juliet Hulme's parents were getting a divorce. The family upheaval was more than just a personal matter. It was a catalyst that would directly impact the extraordinary bond between the two girls. The decision made in the wake of the divorce was earth-shattering for Pauline and Juliet. Juliet was to move out of the country with her father, a plan that meant an unavoidable and imminent separation for the two girls. For Pauline and Juliet, this was an unthinkable scenario. Their world, built on the foundation of their intense, exclusive friendship, was facing the threat of being torn apart. And by the way, when I say their world, I mean that they had literally, in their own imaginations, created their own world, an alternate reality where their names were Deborah and Gina, and they were about to achieve Hollywood stardom. So this is not the generic parental dismissive, oh, they're in their own world. These two girls were highly specific about the own world that they lived in together. The prospect of separation was not merely a farewell to a friend. It felt like a dismantling of their very existence, the end of their shared dreams and fantasies that had in fact become their reality. Confronted with this dire situation, the girls found themselves at a crossroads, one that would lead them down a path of desperation and ultimately to a dark, tragic chapter in their lives. The impending separation set in motion a series of events that would not only shock their families and community, but would also resonate through history as one of the more infamous murders of the 20th century. Pauline Parker and Juliet Hume were in a state of desperate pleading. United in their distress, they implored their parents to allow Pauline to accompany Juliet abroad. The entreaty was not just a request. It was a manifestation of their fear of being torn apart, a plea to maintain the world they had so intricately woven together, a plea to continue the Hollywood journey of Deborah and Gina. However, the response from both sets of parents was unequivocal: refusal. This decision was not taken lightly, but was seen as necessary by the adults, who viewed the girls' intense bond with increasing alarm and concern. In their eyes, the separation was perhaps a much-needed intervention, a chance for both girls to return to what they considered a normal and healthy path of life. Of course, what the adults considered, the parents considered a normal and healthy path of life. But Pauline and Juliet were not to be swayed. The refusal of their parents to bend to their wishes was unacceptable to them. In their minds, a life apart was unimaginable, unbearable. They found themselves backed into a corner, their dream of staying together slipping through their fingers like grains of sand. The intensity of their refusal to accept the separation set the stage for a conclusion that would shock the nation. What transpired as a result of this unwavering determination was not just a chapter in their story, but a horrific event that would echo through the halls of New Zealand's history. The culmination of their refusal to be parted was an act so shocking, so unimaginable, that it left an indelible mark on the psyche of a nation. The end result of their desperation was a grim testament to the lengths to which obsession and fear of loss can drive individuals. A chilling reminder of the dark corners of the human heart. On June 22, 1954, a day etched forever in blood and infamy, the unsettling saga of Pauline Parker and Juliet Hume reached its harrowing climax. Honora Parker, Pauline's mother, unsuspectingly set out with the girls, then aged 15 and 16, for what was intended to be a pleasant afternoon. Their destination was Victoria Park, a place of serene beauty, which was to become the backdrop for a shocking act. The afternoon began innocuously enough, with tea, a symbol of normalcy and tradition. But as they walked down a secluded pathway in the park, the true intention of the girls came to light in a horrific manner. In a chilling act of premeditation, Pauline and Juliet turned on Honora Parker with a brick, using it to fatally bludgeon her in an attack of staggering brutality. The aftermath was as chaotic as it was tragic. The girls, covered in blood, raced back to the tea kiosk in a state of apparent distress, concocting a story of a tragic accident. They claimed that Honora had fallen in an attempt to mask the grim reality of their heinous deed. However, the facade did not hold for long. The police called to the scene were immediately suspicious. The nature and extent of Honora Parker's injuries raised doubts. They were not consistent with those typically sustained in a fall. This incongruence set off alarm bells, prompting a more thorough investigation. As the authorities delved deeper, the fabricated story unraveled, exposing the grim truth behind what was initially painted as a tragic accident. The incident at Victoria Park was not just an act of violence. It was a premeditated murder, one that would leave an indelible mark on New Zealand's history and challenge the nation's understanding of youth, friendship, and morality. The investigation into the shocking murder of Honora Parker took a decisive turn with a crucial piece of evidence: Pauline Parker's diary. This private chronicle, meant to be a hidden sanctuary of thoughts and plans, became the key to unraveling the truth behind the facade the girls had constructed. Within the pages of this diary lay a chilling and detailed account of the murder plans. It was not just a recounting of a crime, it was a window into the minds of Pauline and Juliet. The diary entries were a stark revelation, unveiling the depth of their obsession and the lengths to which they were willing to go to preserve their bond. Armed with this damning evidence, the police moved swiftly. Both girls were arrested, their facade of innocence irrevocably shattered. This case, replete with dramatic and horrifying details, captivated and horrified the public. Here were two young girls who, in the grip of an obsessive friendship, had committed an unthinkable act. As the trial unfolded, the defense put forward a plea of insanity. Given the alternate lives of Deborah and Gina and their Hollywood journey, I'd say that seems fairly legitimate, although when you're talking about children, essentially children like this, where exactly do you separate insanity from imagination? I'm glad I don't have to make that decision myself, But let's get back to the story. The defense sought to paint the girls as victims of their own delusional minds, unable to discern right from wrong. However, this plea found no favor with the jury. The calculated nature of the murder, evidenced in part by the diary entries, suggested a level of awareness and intent that undercut the insanity argument. On August 28, 1954, the jury delivered their verdict. Both Pauline Parker and Juliet Hume were found guilty and sentenced to indefinite detention in separate prisons in New Zealand. The separation that they had so desperately sought to avoid through their heinous act was now imposed upon them by the law. But indefinite detention doesn't mean forever or undefined. In this case, it meant detained at the pleasure of the Queen, I believe was the actual language used. And so, their time in prison lasted only 5 years. During their incarceration, the case continued to be a subject of public fascination and debate, a tale of friendship turned into fatal obsession. The story of Pauline and Juliet raised profound questions about youth, mental health, and the nature of evil, questions that continue to linger long after their release from prison. Years after the infamous murder that shook New Zealand and the subsequent imprisonment, the lives of Pauline Parker and Juliet Hume took divergent paths, each seeking redemption and a new identity in the wake of their dark past. Pauline Parker, upon her release, sought a new fresh start far from the scene of her notorious crime. She moved to England, embracing anonymity as a shield against her past. In this new chapter of her life, she underwent a profound transformation. She adopted a new name, symbolizing her desire to leave behind the person she once was. Her journey also led her to embrace spirituality. She became a devout Catholic, perhaps seeking solace and forgiveness in faith for the sins of her youth. In addition to her spiritual awakening, Pauline found a new purpose in life. She became a children's horse riding instructor, dedicating herself to the care and teaching of young minds. Boy, she doesn't really seem like the best choice for that, but what do I know? This career choice was a poignant shift from her troubled past, reflecting a desire to contribute positively to the lives of others and to nurture rather than destroy. Certainly we hope that that's the case. Juliet Hume's second life path is a little more shocking, a little more distasteful. She realized her dream of becoming a novelist, a famous best-selling novelist, in fact, a career that eerily echoed the fantasies she once shared with Pauline. Under the pseudonym Anne Perry, she gained great renown as a writer of murder mysteries. Her novels, steeped in themes of death and intrigue, seemed to draw from a well of her own experiences, albeit in a fictionalized form. Although I suppose since she was not writing about the murder that she actually committed, there was no law against her profiting from stories about murder. Anne Perry, who died in Los Angeles in April of this year, 2023, at the age of 84, published some 70-plus murder mystery novels over the course of her career as Anne Perry, and was not outed as actually being the murderous teenager Juliet Hume until 2012, when staff members at the Auckland libraries in New Zealand recognized her. She published her first book in 1979, 25 years after the murder, but 33 years before her outing as the murderous Juliet Hume and 44 years before her eventual death. So all that time living in secret inside this reinvented life and identity allowed her to achieve renown in a field that resonated with the darker aspects of her history, specifically murder. Fictional novelist murder, that is, in this case, and real murder in her case. And you all can do as you like, but personally, I'm not letting Juliet Hume / Anne Perry off the hook for bashing her mother's brains in with a brick when she was 16 years old and the older of the two friends, by the way. I actually find it pretty appalling in a bad taste sort of sense that she then was allowed to have an extremely successful decades-long career as a murder mystery writer after murdering her own mother as awfully darn close to an adult. But hey, I mean, what are you going to do? A passion's a passion, I suppose. The post-prison lives of Pauline Parker and Juliet Hume, Hume of course would later become Anne Perry, the famous novelist I was just talking about, were marked by a stark contrast. One seeking redemption and obscurity, the other achieving fame through a genre that mirrored her grim past. Both women, in their own ways, attempted to move beyond the shadow of their youthful crime. each grappling with the legacy of a moment that irrevocably altered their destinies. And again, I'm not giving them the youthful crime pass. Not at 16, not when you're inviting your mom out for tea and then with premeditation bashing her brain in with a brick in public in the middle of the day. Word choice can have a lot to do with how we perceive a crime, and I don't think these girls earned the youthful crime label. I think they were psychos. And with that, and until next time, I'm Zevin Odelberg, and this has been Kinda Murdery.